Hello everyone, I am Akshat and today I'll be talking about my IIM CAP interview experience. So I'm sure that all of you who are appearing for these interviews already know that this year IIM Raipur has pulled out of this process and now we have 8 IIMs in this common admission process, that is the CAP process. And I'm gonna put a picture for reference of all the 8 IIMs participating in this process on the screen right now. So all those of you who aren't aware can get an idea. So let's start with my experience. So I just had my interview a few days ago, and my interview was scheduled in Lucknow and in a hotel, I think Hotel Click Collection, and I had the afternoon slot. So I had to report around 1 to 1:30. It was mentioned in the call letter. I reported a bit earlier than that, maybe half an hour, around 12:30. So I waited in the lobby outside, and once I think it was about 1 o'clock, they put up a sheet on a board with all the names of the candidates there. So I think in one slot there were 40 students. So in my slot as well, there were 40 students, and there were 4 panels, so 10 students in each panel. And then there was a seat number written alongside your name on that sheet. You had to note that and then go up to the fourth floor, I think, and there was a common hall outside of which it was written what PI common hall, and there you have to wait, and each seat had a number on it. So basically you had to find your number and then go ahead and sit there. So slowly and steadily all the candidates arrived, and I think everyone was there at around 1:30. We had almost a full house, but I think 1 or 2 people did miss their interviews, so maybe they had some better calls. Uh, then we was called for our document verification. There were 2 people there, and they were calling out our names, and once our names were called out, then we could go for document verification. And if you did not upload any document at that point when you're registering for this process, then you could do so now. You would get a mail for doing so, and then you'll have 72 hours once you receive that mail to upload that document. So this is like a second chance, like a correction form thing. Okay, and once the document verification was done for all the candidates, till then you had to wait there, and then you had to keep your bags outside and your folders also on a table and your phones as well. So only you could have one pen with you. Then they distributed a sheet which was stamped with IIM CAP proper. It had the logos of all the institutes, and you had to write your name and other details on that. And they also circulated a sheet in which the panel number was assigned to you, right? You also had to mention that on the sheet. And then they announced the topic. You had to write the topic on the sheet, and then you would be having 20 minutes, exactly 20 minutes. And there was not like very strict word limit, but it was mentioned that it should be around 300 words. So you had to write on both sides of that paper itself, and they had also mentioned that you could use the last 5 lines for rough work, but then you have to clearly mention that above that you're using these lines for rough work, and then those lines won't be evaluated, but you won't be getting any extra piece of paper. So I think 20 minutes are enough, but also you have to be very quick with your thoughts and quickly jot down them. So that and that too in a well structured manner. It was written on the top that you will be judged on how you basically write, on your grammar, on your coherence of sentences. It was clearly mentioned there. So my topic that we received, I think this was a repeat topic. I fairly think that I had read on some Reddit interview experience that this topic has already come, maybe not in CAP process, then some other process of some other college, but the topic was, should India host the Olympics? So fairly easy topic. Anybody who has an idea of the past nations that had hosted the Olympics and what all repercussions they had to face and whether they were able to recover all the money that they had invested or not, could easily have written upon it, and whether India is ready or not, they have the infrastructural capabilities or not. So I thought that this was a fairly easy topic, and I had already some idea about it, so I penned down my thoughts, and once this was over, they collected the sheets. I think they had some envelope, they put it inside and sealed it. So it was very well managed process. And then we already had our panels assigned. So till we were waiting for our call for the personal interviews, we were offered some tea, just some tea, that's all. uh, and if you had some parents or someone accompanying you that were waiting below in the lobby, then they were only offered water, that's it. But then soon after, the panelists I think came and they asked the coordinators to send the students in for the personal interview. So I had in my panel, I had panel number 2, I had the second number only. There was one girl before me, and I had a good time interacting with her also. She had, I think, a finance background, and she went before me, and then I was the second guy. So while we were waiting outside our respective panels, there was another guy who was waiting for his. He was in panel 1. I had a good time interacting with him as well. While we were waiting for interviews, we were revising the CMs of various states, because I had read in the interview transcripts on Reddit that they were asking CMs of various states. So guys, and he was definitely asked about three CMs of Madhya Pradesh, and who became the CM after Narendra Modi of Gujarat. So he was asked, I wasn't, but definitely who are going to have their CAP interviews, be well versed with your prime ministers, presidents, and CMs of our country, right? So once that girl came out, I waited for about a minute, and then I was called in. My panel was number 2, as I mentioned, and there were 2 male panelists. I think one was fairly young, maybe mid 30s, and the other guy was also, I think, in mid 30s or early 40s. And they were actually very accommodating, very welcoming. They asked me whether I had lunch or not. I said, no sir, I haven't had lunch, but I have had a good breakfast. They said, do you want to have a quick bite? I said, no, I'll be fine. They even offered me some dry fruits that they had on the table, but I denied politely, because I felt good at that time. And then they started. So first question was again, tell me about yourself. So I have a structured answer for this, where I mention about my academics, about my extracurriculars, and what all interests I have. For all those who are appearing for these interviews, I'm sure you have a well structured answer for this. Just a quick tip, that do not make it very one dimensional. Mention about all the aspects that you have worked upon throughout your career, and that really, and maybe you can have some hooks that you really can leave in there in these answers, so that they can catch on to them. Because I think once you mention this answer, your whole interview revolves mostly around this only. So keep that in mind. And so yes, so I did leave some hooks in there. And then they asked me, why did I join the college that I joined after JE? So I mentioned them about branch versus basically the college thing. So in almost every interview I'm asked this, that so yes, as I was mentioning, in almost all the interviews that have happened till now, they have asked me that how did you get to this college, and why did you choose branch over basically college. So I always tell them that yes, at that point when I was 16-17 years old in 11th and 12th, I was fairly certain that I was interested in the field of computer science, and that I wanted to pursue my bachelor's in engineering in this domain itself. So have a prepared answer of why you chose what you chose in bachelor's. I'm sure you'll be asked about this in your interview. And then basically they started with asking me a little bit about my undergrad, and how I fared in my undergrad. They also will ask you about maybe your 10th and 12th percentage as well. And then I mentioned what all subjects I liked. Basically, this is a cue for you to mention that what all subjects you like. Always be prepared with 1 or 2 subjects about your undergrad, and why you like them, and have a very deep knowledge about these subjects. Okay, so I always mention about blockchain technology and Web3, in which my project, basically BTech project, was also based off. And then they start asking me a few of the pet questions that are always there. Sometimes I feel like professors know a little bit about this topic, then proof of work, proof of stake, these are very common questions that are being asked. And then I was also asked about Bitcoin white paper, how would you compare different blockchains? So these are some questions that you can expect if you're mentioning this, or some other subject. Maybe if you're mentioning machine learning or deep learning, then have a good understanding of neural networks and all. Somewhere in my answer I mentioned about a network, so he did ask me about Dijkstra's algorithm, and so I had to explain it to him, and then I also had to explain the working of this algorithm to him, right? And then of course, if you're from computer science, then you can ask, the interviewer can ask you about AI and all. He first asked me that, are you aware of all the AI and the developments that are happening? So I did tell him, yes, I am. And then he asked me a very fundamental question: what is an agent, right, in AI? So I mentioned him about the environment and agent and actuators and sensors. I remembered this, right? And then I think there was a question on game theory as well, something revolving around Nash equilibrium. I had also mentioned that I was the captain of the table tennis team in my college, so he also asked me to relate that this will be a multiplayer agent, this environment, if two agents are playing table tennis. So what kind of event this will be? So this will be like a sequential multi-agent event. So this was something that I was asked. So they had like in-depth knowledge about these subjects. So if you're mentioning some subject about your undergrad, then do have some like deep knowledge about it, because I feel like the professors that sit for these interviews are very well versed about these subjects, and they will dive really deep into it, right? And then I was also asked about some of the current affairs that I am following, and then inevitably the recent meeting between Trump and Zelensky that happened came up. So he asked me about it. What was that meeting about? So I did tell him, and how the US was planning to pull out military aid. And then he asked me what are the aftermath of that meeting as well. So luckily I had read about this, that when Zelensky returned, a lot of European leaders did tell him about that he did need the US military aid, so he should negotiate. And Zelensky is basically ready to negotiate with Trump and Vance once again. So I did mention him about this, and he seemed fairly satisfied with the answer. He was actually quite impressed, because I knew about this. Then I think only one question I wasn't able to answer in this interview, that who is the current chancellor of Germany. This outrightly I did not remember. I just said I could not recall the name of the person, right? It's some Olaf guy. Before this, the lady was there, Angela Merkel, that I knew, but this new chancellor of Germany, I had no idea about, basically. So it's, if you have no idea about some of the questions, then you can basically say that I cannot recall or I am not aware. That is the best way to go about it. Then I was also asked some very random geography question, that he asked me Burkina Faso, this country, have you heard of it? I said yes. So I play this game called GeoGuessr, so I had heard of this country. So he asked me, in which continent would you find it? So I thought for about 10-20 seconds. Then he asked me not to guess, but I mentioned that if I had to guess, sir, it would be in Africa. And luckily it is in Africa. So that was a lucky guess, but I had some idea about it, because I had played and got this country in GeoGuessr once, right? So these kinds of questions you can expect. In some other panels, I did talk to some people. If they had mentioned FIFA, then they did ask about some geographical countries and which continents you might find. And these will not be the conventional countries. They will not ask you about Italy, Canada, US, right? They'll be asked about some of the lesser known countries. So this is something, maybe geography thing, you can study now that you know about it, because this is something that I was not expecting at all. But luckily I got the right answer, right? And then they also asked me about my family background, right? So what do my parents do? Why don't you go into that field? So this is something also which I was asked about. And then who wrote the Bitcoin white paper, I was also asked about, and whether it's a real person or not. I was also asked about this in another interview actually. So yes, this is also a common question that came up. Then I was also asked about that whenever you are leading a team, I had mentioned a few instances whether there was a instance of conflict and how did you resolve it. So I had a prepared answer for this. This is also a very common question that comes up in interviews. Even while you're filling forms, this question sometimes comes up. So my interview was about 15 to 20 minutes, and I was able to answer almost all questions. The panelists were really good, and I think my interview went pretty well, and they seemed very satisfied, and they even said that it was lovely talking to you. I reciprocated, and then they said all the best, and I left. and then I talked to some of the other fellow students. Some of them were really grilled on their acads, so you need to be very well versed with your acads because you can't be sure which panel you're getting, right? So be well versed with your acads, be well versed about the GK and the current affairs, about the economies, the repo rate, how it has fallen down to 6.25% after 5 years, and what are the implications or a common man of the falling of the repo rate, the basic economy of India right now, and then Trump's policies, what impact they are having on India and the rest of the world, this Zelensky Trump meeting, then Russia Ukraine war, of course. So be well versed with all these topics. Maybe you can study a few of the unconventional countries and the continents which they lie in, and then be well versed with the CMs and the PMs of your country. I had read that someone was asked name 5 PMs of our country, and barring the first one, right, and the current one maybe. So yes, be well versed with those topics. But it'd be fairly easy. It'd be very conversational. Treat it just like a normal conversation. Go in with confidence, and I'm sure you'll do really well. And I hope that my experience will help you, those who have upcoming CAP interviews or other interviews. And all the best to you guys. Thank you so much for watching.